The Thousand Year Blood War arc is bad, and we have already talked about it in an extended video and a follow-up where I just talked about the Zero Squads. Besides the Zero Squads, the issues were obviously the Wizards weren't used properly, the Arancards were just plot devices, the Fullbrings were plot devices, several cast members were either plot devices or just shafted, and Kubo really dropped the ball in making this war feel like an actual war. There were other problems that plagued Bleach since its beginning, but it's the most frequent seen in the final arc. And not to mention the pacing issues, but I guess the anime version may fix those because Kubo doesn't have to draw a weekly manga while he's sick, and he doesn't have to rush anything. Maybe those issues will be fixed, but one of the issues that will definitely not be fixed, and I'm really certain of it, is the Bankai Medallion. And there's a big problem with the Bankai Medallions that is introduced in the final arc, and as I mentioned in the previous video, these medallions allow the Quincy to steal the Bankai of our Shinigami. And the problem is that is mainly that it narratively was not required and it goes nowhere. And the main reason for that is that the Quincy don't really take advantage of it. They beat up the captains and then disappear, and when they come, the captains already have their Bankais back and stop point. So, however, stealing the Bankai really goes nowhere. After all, Quincy's first invasion was a success for them, and Yamamoto was defeated. But if you look at it with a more critical eye, especially during the second invasion, you will see the cracks. Urahara found out how to get the Bankais back, and the captains get it relatively quick. Turns out the Quincy didn't steal the resurrection of the Arancar because Quincy hollows are toxic to hollow powers are toxic to the Quincy, which was never built up, never allured to, or mentioned thus far in the story. And especially if you watch the episodes or chapters before the invasion of the Sternritter in the Soul Society, you will be wondering that how that makes sense when Kurge just absorbed Ion completely whole, why he wasn't damaged or was able to use the Hollow's power for himself. The only reason that seemed like a reasonable thing is because Ichigo's Bankai couldn't be stolen. But for Ichigo, that excuse wasn't even needed because there was another more suitable excuse that would make more sense, and that is because he's a Quincy. Because he's a Quincy, Kurge was unable to trap Ichigo in his jail ability. Because he's a Quincy, Yuhawa couldn't stab Ichigo with his sword, and all that came also out of nowhere, but it was a more suitable, it would have been a more suitable excuse why Ichigo's Bankai couldn't be stolen. But I would say that Ichigo's Bankai being stolen or not didn't really matter because his power was rendered useless anyways. So once your Bankai is broken, you can't use it. So in the long run, Ichigo, whether his Bankai is stolen or not, his ability was rendered useless and he had to get new ones. The next thing is that how quick the Bankais return to their owner. Even Byakuya, who was in the Soul Palace, did he immediately get his that orb that gets his Bankai back as he arrived. If he had died and Asnod still had his Bankai, it would have been more dramatic when Rukia faced Asnod. Yes, it's nice to see Byakuya acknowledging Rukia's ability, but it would also, in a sense, means that Rukia surpassed her brother, so there would be some merit in Asnod actually stealing his Bankai. Then you have to see that it really raised a lot of questions in how the Bankais and Shikais work, because despite their Bankais being stolen, the captains were still able to use Shikai for some reason. Aren't Bankai and Shikai connected, or are they separate entities? Now it makes things more confusing, because we were told that the Sanpakuto is a separate spirit, and when you enter your inner world in Bankai or Shikai, the Sanpakuto changes its shape. Or it's that the Bankai is a separate entity from the Shikai and not a powered up version. It just doesn't make sense from what we have been told to in the story. And well, I guess you could say Bankais were made out of multiple souls, and the soul, it's, I have to resort to headcanon to try to make sense out of it. And if you watch the Thousand Year Blood War arc and see the origin of the Sanpakuto, you may can guess a reason, but that would take a lot of mental gymnastics, and I'm not here to do these kinds of things. It also feels like a missed opportunity, because if your entire Sanpakuto is rendered useless, we could have various things in fights going on. We could have seen captains rely on other fighting styles, like Yamamoto did in the FA Kuratown arc, where he used hand-to-hand combat instead of his Sanpakuto. Maybe we could have seen Dracula flex his Kido abilities. Maybe other captains had to team up to beat a Bankai. Maybe a captain is so experienced with his Bankai that he knows the weak spots and can overcome his Bankai without using his Sanpakuto. Maybe the Vizards could be useful. Remember, they have hollow powers even before the hollow weakness was revealed. The Vizards could have been a wild card, since they can use hollow powers which are about equivalent to the Bankai's ability. So, like, there are so many things that could have been done. Like the lieutenants, who most of them likely don't have a Bankai, or the captains whose Bankais are not stolen could use their Shikais. They could do a variety of things to show, yes, these characters are useful. Think about, freaking Unohana. We don't know anything about Unohana, and when we see her, she will die, so who gives a fuck? She could have fought a Stern Ritter without using her Sanpakuto abilities, perhaps. That would have been lit, because Unohana's fight was built up, and honestly I was utterly disappointed, especially considering she fought Kenpachi of all people. Kenpachi, we have seen enough of Kenpachi, and him losing isn't a problem in any ways. And maybe we could have seen Inoue and Chad be useful, but they were, like always, background characters that had barely any involvement. Maybe the Fullbrings could have been able to do something, and things that the excuse of the hollow powers being the reason why the Quincy were not able to steal the Bankai of Ichigo and them not stealing the resurrection of the Aranka despite not even needing that makes you really confused, like why would they need to steal something inferior uh, to their abilities when they can just storm all the Aranka. You have seen the entire Huecomundo was already the territory of the Quincy. Why would they need to steal the resurrection forms? It makes no sense storytelling wise. The next thing, the Quincy have the Vollständig. A Vollständig cannot be used when you steal a Bankai, which is kind of weird because Kyoge tried to steal Ichigo's Bankai while he was in Vollständig. But regardless, even if we ignore that obvious plot hole, which I assume you can rationalize by saying, well, Kyoge was active in Bankai, so he could maybe he after he stole his Bankai, he would return back to his non-vollständig form, or you have to be active in vollständig while you can try stealing Bankai. And technically it would give more of an advantage if a captain's Bankai is stolen and you can use it as your own. There's something much better than the medallion, and that is Sklaverei. With Sklaverei you can just absorb the entire captain, and you don't even need to use his Bankai. You can use all his spiritual power and perhaps even have his Sanpaku, which is your own complete possession. The only disadvantage you might get is that you are now corrupting your blood with since you are no longer a pure Quincy, and we have yet to see what disadvantage that would give you, unless the disadvantage is that Yuha would just absorb you because he's an asshole and a racist. But if you look at the rest of the arc, you will see Yuha doesn't really give a fuck. He will absorb you even if you are pure Quincy. Because plot. Now to the things that Yuha couldn't possibly defeated Yamamoto without stealing his Bankai. And to that I say honestly it's bullshit. What made no sense is how Yamamoto was confident that his Bankai wasn't able to be stolen. It was a stupid cop-out to make him do a stupid decision and lose. He used his Bankai expecting Yuha Bach is unable to steal it. And the reason we find out why his Bankai wasn't stolen by yourself is because he was not strong enough to use it, but that doesn't make any sense because he could have just stolen the Bankai and already just stealing Yamamoto's Bankai would have been enough to defeat him. He doesn't need to use it, especially that Yamamoto needed Bankai to defeat yourself in general. And what else could have been is that Yuha could have used yourself as a diversion and sneaked attacked on Yamamoto, which there were several opportunities for Yuha Bach just to kill Yamamoto, because he destroyed the barracks of the first squad, appeared behind the backs of Yamamoto several times, and instead of stabbing him, he just went to yourself and gave him a merciful death. Instead of doing that, he could have cheap-shotted Yamamoto, and that would have been enough to defeat him. But he didn't do that. He just waited for him to release his Bankai again and steal it. And worst of all, he never used the Bankai because Ichibe apparently rendered it useless. At least that is what it was implied by painting it black. But yeah, but then again, Yuha Bach can just uh, bestow negate the power of Ichibe and still keeps using the Bankai, but he didn't do that for some reason. Which is a missed opportunity because you have such a powerful weapon and you're using it. Also, Yuhabach has Sunk Altar, which is a technique that only he can use to steal any ability. So he could have stolen Yamam. While it takes preparation time to steal anything, that would have been more effective than. It could have been more a better reason for yourself to fight Yamamoto and wear him down while the real Yuhabach is setting up the Bankai stealing technique or ability stealing technique in general. It wouldn't even need to be a Bankai release required for Yuhabach to use the power. And can you imagine him just summoning all the people that died in the war as his allies? We have seen zombies, but not real undead people like Yamamoto did use. So he just killing everyone in Soul Society, including his own soldiers. He could revive them as his undead army, and nobody could stop Yuhabach if he wanted to. Another missed opportunity which just came up to my mind is how certain Bankais could have been a double-edged sword, and maybe a captain could have let Sequency just steal the Bankai on purpose, and said captain, who knows how the abilities work, could have taken advantage and defeat the enemy using his own Bankai, just that regardless whether it was released by the opponent or by himself. And I think that could have been Kuraku's the best showcase for Kuraku's ability, because Kuraku's Bankai was rather disappointing. It's it's nice in terms of fitting his personality, telling a story that's apparently really famous, but how it was released and used in the final arc feels rather rushed, similar to Rose Bankai, and it was useless. And not that it was the problem being that it was useless, but how it was, the steps, how it went. It felt like another boring Bankai, which many hated at the time, and the only reason people like it now is because they some people bothered to research about the story Kuraku's Bankai is the abilities are based off, and made several videos about it. I don't really think that makes it any more interesting than the other Bankais, but I guess that's up to preferences. So I think I pretty much covered everything about the Bankai Stealing Medallion being pointless. For one, missed opportunity to make non-Bankai uses relevant. Missed opportunity of the Quincy actually taking advantage of the Bankais they have stolen. Fourth, like I guess I mentioned the previous points already mentioned the Vizards already. Sclavery outclasses the Bankai stealing ability. There were other more effective methods to defeat the captains. And if you think about it, that if Hitsugaya could have beaten the Iron without his Bankai being stolen, or that something as stupid as releasing aside from releasing her Bankai in front of the enemy, like it's something as easy to use as Zenbone Sakura could defeat someone that was utterly stupid, or actually creating an opponent that is so skilled and has an ability that can be so devastating, like Asnod's ability already is, that no matter what Byakuya did, his Bankai could not give him the edge in battle. I think that would have been far more interesting. And the other point is that it would be more reasonable why Yamamoto actually released this Bankai instead gambling like he did in the final arc, risking his Bankai to be stolen. Because when he was releasing his Bankai for the first time, I was like, really? Are you retarded? Your opponent can steal Bankai and he's a leader of the Quincy. And the problem obviously with Ichigo is that his Bankai gets broken, so in the end it didn't matter if his Bankai was stolen or not. Maybe the Quincy could have broken other characters' Bankai and they had to reforge it, which makes them less useful. Like Byakuya's pellets may be missing, so he can't use his Bankai as effective like he used to. Like maybe makes Sclavarai outclassing the Bankai Medallion, and finally the Shinigami, thanks to Urahara, who is obviously a genius, immediately solving the Bankai issue a bit more in a more stupid way, because it would have been more interesting if the characters actually had to work to get their Bankai back, like each trying to get the medallion back from the Quincy and actually let Urahara dissect each separate Bankai medallion to get the Bankai out, which would put some captains temporarily out of commission and made other characters shine, which is a missed opportunity mainly of the Bankai medallion. And with that, I end my video. I hope I made my point clear, and this is why I think the Bankai medallion was a waste in storytelling voice. There's also something interesting which makes it even more confusing, as I forgot to add to the video while editing, and that is that Arankas can have Quincy powers bestowed, but if Quincy's are weak to hollow powers, how can Aranka hold Quincy powers if that ability is toxic to them? How can something like Ichigo exist? How can Yuhabach steal Ichigo's Quincy and hollow powers, but not his Shinigami powers? And that's also more confusing, that Quincy are somehow weak to hollows. And with that I really rest my case. This is just... it's just stupid.